a 4-month entrepreneurship course with action learning pedagogy. And in Estonia, there has been done semi-structured group interviews. The number of students 48, and individual in-depth interviews to 16 students. While we analyzed the data, 3 strong themes emerged. We found 3 strong themes causing these strong emotions. And the themes are when the students are moving from a traditional to a constructivistic learning environment, this kind of action-based learning context. The other theme we recognized is when the students are experiencing issues related to cooperative teamwork, and the third one is when students are experiencing very challenging tasks. Within this first theme, when students are moving from traditional learning environment to a constructivistic learning environment, it seemed to be the most important trigger to higher levels of emotions. We noticed anxiety, confusion, different kind of mixed feelings, etc. In Finland and in Namibia, we found even doubts and fears before entering a new learning environment. In Estonia, low motivation, low self-awareness seemed to cause strong negative emotions. In the case of Namibia, we noticed that as it was a pretty new study program, it started almost at the same time when the research started there. There was quite a lot outside pressure and doubts against this new way of learning, so that caused strong negative emotions within the students. But how the students handled these emotions and went forward, it seemed to be that dialogue within their team companies, within their class teams, reflection within the team, within the peer students and with the coach or teacher, and support from the peers and the coaches and the teacher, they were really important for them to adjust quicker to this, quicker and smoother to this new learning environment. Within the theme of experiencing issues related to cooperative teamwork, there were many kind of issues related to teamwork, the environment, team performance, task division, time management in teamwork, and all in all finding your place in this totally new group of people. But however, based on the interviews from the students, we found out that all the students from all these 3 countries, they still considered this teamwork experience very good, very necessary, very useful, because they saw that it will really help them to cope with the future work life. Then within this third team, experiencing very challenging tasks, it was the question of the students experienced negative emotions when they had to get involved with the tasks they had very minor or even no previous experience. And to mention some, like financial calculations, sales prognoses, budgetary issues, sales and customer management tasks, and so forth. But again, although there were a lot of strong feelings, hesitations, and mixed feelings, after going through these emotions, the students reported that those tasks gave them a lot of more self-confidence, and they helped them to cope and deal with the new challenges, and also they got a lot of motivation out of these new challenging tasks. So based on our research, we are resulting and presenting an idea of a S-curve model, where we have kind of gathered all the findings in one picture. And here is our model. You can find the S-curve in 3 different colors here. There is the emotion line and the timeline, and the students' experience start from this left side when they enter to a new challenging learning environment, when they meet new students to cope with, to work very closely, when they will get these very, very new challenging jobs, tasks to take care. So very often we recognize that the students experience those very strong emotions when they started with all these 3 different areas. And there were some triggers, some dilemmas which caused that could have been some struggle with the new team members, or just to adjust yourself to take care of your take the responsibility of your learning, instead of just listening to the teacher who is pouring you all the information, or struggling with the budgetary issues. So those were the dilemmas causing the strong emotions. But then the deeper they went through this, and when they got this support, reflection, dialogue done with their peers and coaches and teachers, then they had the possibility to get the most out of the experience, and also we found out deeper learning. And at some point during the timeline, when they got used to all these new challenges and learned more, they reached the level of, we call it here, euphoria, where they mainly, some got it earlier, some a little bit later, but they had the feeling that I have managed, I am very strong, I can take any challenges, I can conquer the world. That was in many cases the feeling. We also recognized a couple of giving up cases, as you can see here on the right side. Actually 3 students in the Finnish group decided not to continue in this way of learning, but it was mainly because of personal reasons. But of course, then the personal targets got more stronger than the benefits which they got out of this learning environment. So, but some of them were recognized. And the implications and values, value of this research is that we strongly feel that the deeper the students experience these negative emotions, the deeper they experience learning. And also, when the students are on this euphoria level, they really have this strong feeling that they can deal whatever comes into their life, to exaggerate a little bit. So they have an improved capacity to deal with uncertainty, and that is very, very important for the students in all sides of life, or their working life, or as entrepreneurs, or as private persons. We feel that students should be encouraged to experience negative emotions instead of being afraid of them. And negative emotions should be seen as opportunities to learn and to experience new situations. But on the other hand, we stress strongly that the students should not be left alone with these strong emotions, either positive or negative. So that's why this kind of safe team environment with a very close contact with your peer students, very close contact to your coach, or in the Estonian case, the teacher who is following very closely what is happening. They have to have the possibility to share their feelings, to get the support, to have the dialogue about it. So that's the moral side of this thing. But if it's handled in a good way, so that there is this support and possibility to have discussions, then you can really benefit a lot out of it. So we see that the learning environment that allows and even encourages failure could really be in long term beneficial to the students. And we see that the teachers' support during these negative experiences could be aligned, especially around these three identified themes. Okay, so the next step, how we are proceeding with our paper, with our research in our research team, is that we are still digging a little bit deeper and more precise about emotions, negative emotions and learning, and in entrepreneurship education in our theoretical, to make our theoretical framework comprehensive and strong. We are doing some re-analyzing of our data, and of course our S-curve model is not ready yet. We have to modify it, but all in all, we feel that these findings could have important implications for the teachers designing learning environments in action-based entrepreneurship education, as well in other domains in higher education. So thank you for your attention. So I will be happy to reply to your questions. If you have any in mind, please.
We are talking about the Estonia program. What about, you mentioned that it was a 4-month course.
Yes.
Was it adult learning?
No, it wasn't. No, it was an obligatory course for engineering students, which lasted 4 months. Yeah. Anything else? Sorry, please.
I think an interesting and necessary question is it's an unusual mix of countries.
Yes.
Namibia and Finland and Estonia. Could you sort of add a few words about the selection of countries?
Yes. The Finland and Namibia are in this research because we in both cases they use the similar kind of, or they have a similar kind of entrepreneurship education program, and actually it's in 2008 when the Polytechnic, the rector of the Namibian Polytechnic visited Finland, and he saw this entrepreneurship education in practice, and he wanted to have it in Namibia also, and then they started the program there in 2009. So it was kind of it is kind of interesting to see how is it going in two quite different kind of surroundings. And Estonia case came up kind of by accident, but as we saw that we have been doing a similar kind of research, then we started to compare our data, and so that was not planned from the beginning to have the Estonia in this research, because I have been doing this Finland-Namibia research, but then later on Estonia joined this data pool. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Then I think there is time for the second presenter, Marina Shibishova.
Yeah.
And you have a presentation about animated cartoons.
Right.
So I will give you this. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Marina Chibisova. I come from Russia, from Moscow City University of Psychology and Education. And I'm very happy to be here on this very day, because it's the 25th of January. In Russia, that's Saint Tatiana's Day, and it is a holiday devoted to all the students and the professors of the university, because on this very day, in the year 1755, Moscow State University was founded. So let me congratulate you all on this, our professional holiday, our Students' Day back there in Russia. Why I'm going here today is not to present a research. I'm going to present a technology that I have been using for some time already, and give a bit of an overview of the theoretical background and of possible implications. And I will also show two very small animated movies, and I will present possible ways of dealing with them in the classroom. And what's that? Oh, that's okay. And why animated cartoons? I'm totally sure that any one of us has been using different types of educational videos, like cinemas and educational films and everything. I've been also working a lot with different types of cinemas and videos, and then I searched the articles and different types of handbooks about using videos. And now I've been using animated cartoons to teach psychological courses. Why animated cartoons? First, they are very expressive and very meaningful. And the problem that I encountered while using different types of films was that the students got away with the details. They started going very deeply, and sometimes they were distracted by not very important things about the plot and the characters. Whereas when you use an animated cartoon, it is a very artificial, conditional situation, both emotional, it can be very deep and very interesting in explaining and understanding some of life processes and phenomena. And what is also very important to me is that animated cartoons create a positive atmosphere and also can be used to raise motivation. Lots of people throughout the world have been using animated cartoons with different purposes and to teach different subjects. Well, I've found that the following subjects, the teachers of the following subjects have used animated cartoons: chemistry, science, communication, organizational behavior, and management courses. As I teach psychological courses, I use animated cartoons to illustrate all types of family interaction between people, child development issues, and so on. Well, what educational tasks can be solved via animated cartoons? Well, I speak mostly about teaching psychology, but I think that in different types of social sciences they can be applied. First, it can be used to present a concept or a problem to the students. Before we start delivering a lecture, before we start going into theories, we could use an animated cartoon to present the concept to the audience. The second task could be to help students to apply the theoretical knowledge that they already have. Of course, we may use case studies for that and all types of extra educational activities, but using animated cartoons can be an unusual and original way to apply the knowledge to analyze the situations, as it is a conditional situation, and you don't have to go into details and you don't have to provide many extra information about this. And the final task is to raise the motivation. Because when you use something emotional and deeply touching, that helps to keep the interest to your subject. Now I'm going to show you a very small part of an animated movie. It is a Russian movie, it is an extract from a Russian movie, but the characters do not speak at all. So you will only see the pictures, and I will give you a task. I will give you a question to ask. After we watch this movie, the question will be the following. You will see a family there. And the question will be as follows. Do you find the mother's position efficient? And if yes, why? And if her position is not efficient, why? Oh, I'm sorry. What shall I do to start? That's it. So, do you think that the mother's position is efficient? Do you think that she's doing well with her children? She's doing all she can. That's a good idea. And what is she doing? She's being very patient, yeah. Anything else? She's trying to please them. Is it efficient? No. Why? Yeah, they don't respect her. Great. Anything else? Is her position efficient? Okay, we can go on like this for some time, and that could be a very good introduction to the topic of family interaction and efficient parental position or non-efficient parental position. And that's really great because they don't stop, don't go very deeply into the details, and they use that as an example. I use this very movie also when we speak about ADHD, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. And this time, when we study this theme, I ask the students, do you think that the children in this family are hyperactive? Yes or no? And give your reasons why. And after that, I go on with the theoretical overview. So, When I use the animated cartoons in the classroom, I generally use the following steps to make them an educational tool. The first very important thing is to give a task or ask a question to the audience. Later on I will say a little bit more about the risks of using this technology, and the main risk would be turning this into entertainment. Because the students love cartoons, and when I show them even very short extracts, they generally say, "Let us watch to the very end." And even it's like, meant for the children, they still very motivated, and they generally say, "Well, that's what we basically like. Let us watch to the end." So that's very important to create a task prior to watching, so that it wouldn't be for entertainment, but we'll have to start reflection. The second part will be to show the animated cartoons. Generally, the cartoons are rather long. They could be like 20 minutes long, but that makes it a bit too long for the classroom. So I generally prefer very small extracts, like the one that I show you, that is like 1.5 minutes. Even 5 minutes could be long enough, because when they have a task and they have to concentrate, it's better to use a shorter extract from the movie. The third would be arranging a discussion or debriefing after watching. So they have to ask the questions, or they have to do the task that they have received before watching. And it can be done both in small groups, or it can be done with the whole audience. And if it is necessary, finally, a theoretical overview can be done, if it is relevant, if we use this movie to present a new topic, to present a new theme. If we want to use the animated cartoon in order to apply knowledge, then the theoretical overview would be the first part. So I could give a theoretical overview, and then I could give a task, show the animated cartoon. Now I will also provide another cartoon. It will be a very short one, also like 1.5 minutes. This is also a Russian cartoon. There are some words that the characters speak, but they are basically not very important for understanding. And that the second animated movie has to do with the school situation. So we generally use that when we speak about developmental psychology, like different stages that the children pass in their development, or when we speak about getting ready for school, discussing if the child is ready to go to school. And that's the question that I'm going to ask. You will see a short extract from a Russian movie about Masha, a small girl, and her friend, the bear. And there is a school for this girl, and the bear will be the teacher. And the question is the girl ready to go to school? Will she make a good schoolgirl or not? Watch to the very end, because it's a long movie. So, do you think that she's ready to go to school? Will she make a good school child, a good schoolgirl? Yes or no? Why not?
It seems that
she likes to play, great.
have fun,
Right.
doesn't really seem to sort of try to get into an effort understanding what this is about.
Right, great. So we speak about motivation and about her ability to follow instructions. Great. Any other ideas? She seems, she was interested, she seems motivated. Yeah, right. Great. If they are adequate to her age, right. Isn't passive enough. Right. She can't wait. She can't be patient here. Great. Anything else? Yeah. So, both options are possible. We can use it as an introduction, or after we have discussed the theoretical approaches to that transition from kindergarten to school, I could use this movie to illustrate and to ask the student to apply what they have already learned. When you have already studied the school motivation and different concepts about this transition to school, then they can apply this knowledge to analyze the situation. So, what makes a good educational animated movie? There are two things that the experience, as the experience shows, are very important. The first important thing is that the plot should be very understandable or well known. In case we waste too much time explaining what the movie is about, what the previous relations between the characters are, we just lose the point and we waste too much time on that. So basically, it's easier to take the animated movie that is more or less known to the audience. And I've been doing that with both the students, the master students and PhD students, and for adult learning programs, and when I work with teachers. And I generally am very cautious about choosing the movies because the younger generation knows a different scope of movies. For example, I find a great source to use in the classroom in American movies, and I use a lot of South Park series to illustrate teenage subcultures and interaction between teenagers and the parents. But this is really, the reaction is very different whether I work with students or with adult learners. Because the students know the series and they react really very positively and they are interested to discuss, whereas the teachers generally show a more negative attitude towards these American movies, and they say, like, you know, we're not very what is it about? We don't feel that it's interesting, so you have to be very cautious, and sometimes I choose the movies made for very small children in order to be shown for adult learners. And the second point is that the animated movie should be debatable or controversial. So it's better to choose an extract that is good for discussion. It should not give answers, it should provoke discussion. So when I choose, if I choose these movies, it's mostly because they are interesting to discuss. And when we ask a question, it shouldn't be understandable at once what the correct answer is. So I would not show a child that behaves perfectly, so that there would be no point for discussion. And the very important question is, are there any risks if we use animated cartoons when teaching higher education students? Well, there are different researches. Some of the researches show that the animated cartoons raise motivation, and the students are more interested in the subject, but there are also opposite researches. First of all, some researchers claim that the animation is a simplified version. And when we use too many animated cartoons, the students just may evoke misconceptions. They may simplify the phenomena that they study. They tend to look at it in a very simple way. Another risk is that when we use ready images, we prevent students from using their imagination. When we use videos and animated cartoons, they just don't come up with their own examples, with their own ideas. And what I personally have encountered, the main risk of using this method is that sometimes the students tend to treat it as an entertainment. They feel that I do this to entertain them, to make the class more inspiring, more interesting, but they just do not try to go deeply into what we are studying. So that is why I should say that an animated cartoon is can be a great educational tool, but it shouldn't be used maybe in any class or whatever. I use it from time to time, and that really helps to raise motivation. I did a quantitative research asking students about the results. What are the results of using animated cartoons in the classroom? And they mostly showed a very positive feedback, speaking about raising interest and feeling positive towards the subject and creating a positive atmosphere. But some of them also pointed out that too many animated cartoons are not very good for studying, because the psychology is not only about cartoon, it is a very deep subject about deep learning. So I think it could be a really very efficient technology, a very interesting way to present psychological issues and psychological phenomena, but it's very important to be very careful and not to be carried away with its advantages, and it's really important to be aware of the disadvantages and the risks that we may use. So, I think that my 20 minutes are over, and thank you very much for your attention, and if there are any suggestions or questions, I'm really willing to listen to them.
I have one question. So let's say that you have a course of
Right.
a couple of months. So how often you would say it's wise to use this method so that it's still new and
Valid,
fresh?
yeah. Well, generally, I always try to use different types of videos during teaching psychology, because psychology is about relations, about people, and there is no better way to speak about relations than showing that to the audience. But if it is a kind of a 2-month course and we have classes every week, I would say that in 2 weeks course, 3 animated cartoons will be more than enough, or even less. Otherwise, it becomes entertainment.
That's right.
Yeah, and now that also it was a real interesting thing, because the students also started coming out with the ideas about animated cartoons. And sometimes when I show them a small extract, someone from the audience comes and says, "May I also bring a movie so that we could watch it next time?" And some of my best examples that I use, especially among the modern movies that I don't have many experience of watching, come from the student audience. And now that I'm considering using it as a kind of a home task, so bring the movie that could illustrate the phenomena that we are studying currently.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? If not, thank you.
Thank
It was really interesting. Thank you. And then I can welcome the next presenter, Anker Helms Jørgensen from Copenhagen. Welcome. Want to use these?
Good morning, gentle ladies and gentlemen. I actually planned 5 minutes into the talk to say, if any of you were in the wrong place, then please feel free to leave. That doesn't seem to be necessary. Fine. So we're here. Now for something completely different. Namely, I'm going to talk about this, how I teach IT professionals as diploma students 3 core academic skills at the IT University of Copenhagen, namely writing, the academic genre, and peer reviewing in their first term at the university as a preparation for a research project in the first term. Now, this is an overview of this talk. First, I'll say a few words about this new IT University of Copenhagen. I'll move into the diploma studies and diploma students at our university. Then I'll introduce this course activity called Introductory Academic Project, which I run with the students, and I'll elaborate my 3 focal points. I'll present some results and discuss the results, and finally I'll hook up to the theme higher level education, the themes of this conference. Now, this is the IT University of Copenhagen, established in 1999. Our mission is to create value in society through IT, and we see IT broadly as science, business, and arts. So it's not just technology. We do research, of course. We do education from PhD to diploma students, and I'm focusing on diploma students here. This is a selection of the 32 diploma students I taught this fall. They are IT professionals. You see their age varies quite a bit, from around 25 to 55. They want to strengthen their career, and they're working full-time, all of them. So they're quite busy. Their education varies very much, from just 9 years in public school to 1 or 2 years in university. But these students haven't completed their education, so they want something else. And most of them have a sort of technical education as programmer or similar. 3/4 of them have never done a university course before, so this is quite new to them. They select among around 80 courses, and they tend to select hands-on courses, object-oriented programming, or project management, that's fine, but we certainly also want them to learn the core academic skill, namely to run a research project. And we want them to do this in the very first term. So this talk is about how I do this. Now this is an overview of the term. And this is the main bit, 10 weeks of project group work under supervision, where they work with a topic they select themselves. And this results in a report, handed in just before Christmas, oral exam in January. A typical example of a report could be, can Facebook obstruct your career? And the answer is, yes, it can, because employers are looking into everything they can get their teeth into. Right, what I'm talking about here mostly is these 5 initial weeks. It's on Thursdays, that's why I put it on T, from 5 to 8. And these students are not familiar with group work. They're not familiar with the academic literature. They know very little about research methods, and they're not used to writing. And they're certainly also uncertain about their role, their new role as university student, and they have doubt, can I make it? So my challenge is to bring them up to speed in those initial 5 weeks so they can run this project by themselves under supervision. I'd like you to note that the only mandatory things in this course is to hand in a report by the end of the term and then show up at the oral exam. Everything else is voluntary. Now, my approach consists of 3 items, namely writing, academic genre, and peer review. And being a practitioner, I developed this approach from bottom up without consulting the literature. Sorry, I'll return to it. But if you want a theoretical framework, you might think of PBL or student-centered learning, deep approach to learning, etc., and more on this later. Now I'd like to take a closer look at those 5 initial weeks. In the first week, I have the students work with a peer-reviewed paper. In the second week, I have the students work with a very good report from an earlier term. In the third week, I asked them to do a very small empirical project and write it up on 1 page. And the final 2 weeks, we look at academic literature, we select the topics, they select the topics, and we do the formation of the groups. Now, I'll give some attention to what we do the first week, because that's the sort of the core thing of this course. We work with a peer-reviewed paper, and the idea is to have the students meet the academic goal up front, namely peer-reviewed papers. I want to challenge the students, and I could certainly draw on some of your work. And I want them to overcome the challenge. And I want them to start the writing. So I found, after some scrutiny, this article called "Why Are Mobile Phones Annoying?" It's from this peer-reviewed journal called Behavior and Information Technology. And it describes an experiment, a proper experiment in the real world, where travelers on buses and trains are exposed to 2 kinds of conversations, mobile conversation and face-to-face conversation. And the reactions of the bystanders, these travelers, are then recorded and then subjected to quite heavy statistical analysis. Now the paper, it comes to 9 pages, so it's not a simple, small thing. But the crucial thing is that the domain, mobile phones in the public space, it is quite well known. The paper is well written, it's well organized, the idea, the method is clearly described. So it's quite approachable. Before I embarked on this activity, I was very much in doubt. Was it too difficult? Perhaps, maybe, yes, no. But finally I decided to run for it. The key thing is a sort of scaffolding set of materials. You can see I've been writing 1, 2, 3, 7, 5, etc. Pointers to 44 points of interest in this paper, where something important or relevant is going on. And then the students get this version of the paper with those 44 pointers, and for the ambitious students, the raw paper without these pointers. Then I have an introduction that explains what it's all about. I have a comprehensive set of explanations of all these 44 points. What's going on here? For example, point number 5, why and Lyon 99 conducted a large survey. Well, they're using what we know already, using the theory, using the literature. Then 2 sets of questions, one on format and structure. For example, one on format and structure. Where are possible explanations for this annoyance being presented? It's a matter of finding, and the student can of course just look at those little numbers because all the interesting things are there. And the second set of questions is on content. That's more difficult, and the key question there is, does the paper actually deliver what it promises? Does it actually give an answer to the title? Well, not really. A more proper title would be Towards Understanding Why Mobile Phones Are Annoying, because the paper doesn't give a definitive answer. Right. So I asked the students to read the paper like a bird, sometimes like an ant, for structure and for detail at times, and then write an abstract, 10 to 15 lines. And out of the 32 students, 28 did it. And then they did student peer review on each other's abstracts, and I gave them feedback as well on their abstracts. That was the first week. And the second week is basically a repetition, but here we're using a very good report from an earlier term. The idea is to have the students get a very firm idea of what's expected by the end of the term and try to convince them, yes, we can do this, also like earlier students have done, and perhaps even do it better. So write an abstract, 10 to 15 lines, and then write 3 good things about the report and 3 things that could be improved in order to sharpen their critical mind. 29 out of 32 students did it. And then again, student peer review on these abstracts plus feedback from me. Now, in the third week, they are taking on their researcher's cap, namely, I asked them to do a little empirical study of some IT problem. Ask their friends on Facebook, ask their children, ask their colleagues about something which is not obvious. And this is an example by Rasmus, do we lose our friends to Facebook? The idea is to have the students say, after 3 weeks in university, I've been doing a small research study, and I've been writing it up in 1 A4 page, following the structure, introduction, method, results, discussion. In this case, only 24 out of the 32 students did it, but still 75%. It's a bit harder, takes more time. And they review each other's papers, and I give them feedback as well. Now, this was what we're doing, and now I'll tell you a little bit about these 3 focus points, namely writing. The first one of the 3, do you recognize this man? You know his name's Thomas Edison. He actually came up with no less than more than 1,000 patents in his life. That's about 1 per month. That's quite stunning. And he wrote no less than 3,500 notebooks and made sketches and wrote a lot of text. And he said, I write in order to find out what I'm thinking. That's a sort of compelling argument I use towards the students, not write just to hand in a report, but use writing as a thinking tool. Now, the next sort of focal point is the genre, introduction, method, results, discussion. Very simple structure, but the students can hook onto it, and later they can add, theoretical background, perspective, conclusion, whatever. This actually works in the beginning. Finally, the student peer review. Peer review is very important for us as researchers and for our students as a learning tool, but it's also very sensitive. Getting feedback can be very hard. Giving feedback can also be very difficult. And there's this issue of dominating students. There's this issue of time. So some educational developers in Aarhus University, Tine Wienfeldt and Gry Sandholm, have developed a game where they sort of embed this social feedback situation in a game setting with rules. So they actually have rules for this game. Rules for turn-taking, time management, and rules of conduct. What is allowed, what is not allowed. And here you see the game board. Here you see 3 students working with it. This is a game board. And I'll just mention this token. This token can be raised by any student if some of the other students are breaking the rules. For example, the author is defending the text, not allowed, just listen. Or the critic or the feedback giver is focusing in on some very irrelevant small details like commas or periods or whatever. So things have been put into rules and it works. Now for the results, and I'll give you 3 snippets. First, I'll give you some results for the very first week where they had this peer-reviewed paper, then for the first 5 Thursdays, and then for the whole term. And the first week with the peer-reviewed paper, you recognize the paper. I actually gave them a paper questionnaire in class. 27 students were there. And I asked them about relevance, difficulty, timing. And you see the answers, 25, 26, very close. It works well. I also asked them this question, should this exercise be repeated next term? And 20 students said yes, and 5 said yes with modification or changes, because some students have problems reading an English academic text. Not surprising, but still okay. Now the next bit is the 5 weeks. I asked them, please write 3 to 4 of the most important things you've learned in the first 5 weeks. And I gained, from 29 students, I gave 95 points in all. And these are most of them, and my 3 focal points are there. And the top one is academic genre, fine. And the 2 in the bottom, peer feedback and writing. One could say, well, it's disappointing that those 2, peer feedback, are not higher on the list. But if you look at the list, for example, this one, strengthen the role as a student. It's a very important thing that they actually feel that they have understood what it's now being like to be like a student, and they feel sort of assimilated in a university setting. And also conduct an academic project. It's very important, all of it. So one can think of it as added value. Now the final bit, that's where your university earns its money when the students are passing exams. 30 out of the 32 students actually completed their group work, handed in report, and attended exams, oral exams, 2 weeks ago, and all passed. 2 of them just above, and then the distribution was quite fine. So average C+. Now, I'll now return to theory and literature, because after I've started to tell people about what I'm doing here and write about it, of course I have to look into literature. Sorry, I didn't do it before. Of course, the Swales and Feet book comes up because it has numerous very good material, exercises on the academic genre and how to teach this to students. It's a very good book. And Tatiana Yakontova in Ukraine has actually been inspired by this book and made this 2-page paper, which you see here, namely National Food and Academic Performance, Is There Any Correlation? It's a made-up paper she wrote herself. It follows this academic genre convention, and it's a good learning tool in her teaching. I also came across some work by John Bean, where he looked at, can first-year students read primary literature? And his answer is yes, under the right conditions. But the point is, I think the single takeaway point from this lecture is, yes, none of these good people suggest doing it in the very first week, which I've been doing. Now, for a few words of discussion, validity. Does this transfer to other settings? Well, I believe it does. I haven't heard of anyone who's been doing it, but I'm sure it can be done. But do note that my students here are extremely motivated. They are really, really hungry, having been working in the IT industry for 5, 10, 20 years. They really are hungry to get some, to move on. Another point is that they actually pay for the course, being diploma students. They pay 1,400 euros. And 1/3 of them pay themselves, the other 2/3 paid by their employer. So that also, they want value for their money. In terms of validity, I'm wearing no less than 3 caps. I'm the originator of this study activity. I'm biased. I'd like to see it as a success. I'm teaching the student. There's a strong asymmetric relation in power between the students and I. I'm assessing the students also. And I'm doing the survey. But still, so this is not sort of strict academic cricket, but I think it's an indication at the research level, and hopefully can it serve as inspiration in practice. And then the final slide. Tying up to 3 of the 4 themes for this conference, what kind of learning and teaching is expected in higher education institutions? Thinking a little about that question, it's quite clear to me that what I'm doing with these students is actually quite different from what they expect. And I should add one thing, I actually learn the names of the students. So the second week, I know all their names. And that, I can tell you, makes a difference. It supports everything else. The second thing is ways to prove that teaching is learning and learning is teaching. Well, I think that's what I'm trying to do. And recently I came across a citation by Ramsden. He says, the aim of teaching is to create space for learning. To me, that's a very powerful and elegant way of expressing the relation between teaching and learning. And I think basically that's what I'm trying to do. The 4th point, how to grow as a university teacher. Well, developing this study activity has definitely supported my development, letting go of traditional ways of thinking about teaching, and a far better understanding of this relation nexus between teaching and learning, and finally, in believing in the resources and motivation of the students. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then there is some time for questions.
Mm-hmm.
Please.
Thank you very much. I've written down lots of tips for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a very technical question.
Yes.
You use good papers from
Yes.
previous terms.
Yes.
Do you give these papers full, or do you abridge them or shorten them in some way?
No, the real stuff.
Are
The
they
real
not
stuff.
seduced to, use the parts of the good papers of previous terms for their own research? No.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I mean that when I try to do this, I
Yes.
sometimes felt that the students were inclined to use the ideas and approaches they read about in their own.
Oh yes, yes, yes. Transfer.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of transfer. One of the things I didn't say because time was critical, transfer. I mean, all the students, when they start their group work, they start to make a time plan for those 10 weeks, and they start with a table of content, a draft table of content for their report, starting out with IMRD. So yes, a lot of transfer, and they often refer back to, I mean, this mobile phone paper, and Katrine and Jeanette, who wrote this report, I mean, they refer to that. They have a methodology, first a quick and dirty study, and then the real study. Many students copy that, so there is a lot of transfer.
Okay, please.
Sorry, I wasn't here from the very beginning.
All right.
So maybe you said that, but
Mm-hmm.
in the end you mentioned that you don't think many people have started this kind of teaching from the very first week
Mhm.
you have.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's your critique or fears in that? Why not to start from the very first week? What are the objections, and what are the sort of benefits or reasons you are still doing it?
Well, that's a big question. The thing is that the fear is this is too difficult. I think everyone can agree to that. First, I mean, IT professionals, they haven't been in university before, most of them. This is difficult stuff. And the benefit is that actually they can do it. They get this success experience. I mean, I'm helping them. I'm creating this scaffolding package. And even the weakest, there was one student who said initially it was very fear-provoking, but gradually I worked on it, and yes, I got through it, and now I want to read other papers. Wow. It's the best thing you can hear as a teacher. Why it's not being used more widely? No idea. I mean, how many of you have been exposed to a peer-reviewed paper in your first week in the university? It's not common. It doesn't, well, you have some years behind you, but still. Okay.
Some other questions? You told us that you are the creator of
Mhm. Yes.
this diploma course. I'm interested to know, how did you put all this together? Where do you base your course plan? Where does it come from?
Well, the thing is, some 3 years ago, I took over this course with 2 weeks' notice. And I really had to think very quickly. And the course has developed quite a bit. But I think basically the thing is, we have these 2 sections, the start with the 5 weeks and then the 10 weeks where the real thing goes on. And the question is, how do you balance those 2 periods? Should it be 3 weeks, 5 weeks in the beginning? That's one thing. And basically it's a sort of minimal solution towards, creating some momentum, some speed, some energy towards jumping onto the more, in many ways, more difficult research project where they work on their own, under supervision. They meet their supervisors every 2 weeks or so. People have their full-time work, they have a family, many have small children, they disagree, all sorts of things can happen there. But once you create this sort of momentum feeling, yes, we can do that, then things move.
A lot of emotions.
Yeah, exactly. I really like that S-curve of yours. I
Yeah.
mean, it fits so well on this.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to hear.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you. Anything else you have in mind? If not, thank you for the
Thank
very
you.
interesting presentation. We still have one presentation left, yes. So we will come here. Are you Tavi
Yeah.
Vaikjärv?
Yeah,
Yes, so please, the floor is yours.
so thank you and good day. I don't know, is it good or bad to be last presenter? Because so much that I want to say, I think has already been said during this conference. But as the previous presenter, I'm a practitioner myself. I had challenge. I took it upon me, and now I'm not here more as to present it, but I'm hoping to make the talk a little bit shorter and have more time for discussions or your suggestions, because I think the main benefit of a conference is that you meet different people from different fields, and then you can share those ideas. But so the outline of my talk, I want to give the background of my course and the mind setting. I will talk briefly about what I have done before, what I tried this year, and then give the results and my my personal view that what succeeded, what not, and maybe, as I said, hear your suggestions what to do differently. But sorry, the course is a mathematics course. It's the second course in the curriculum. So it starts in November, although the students start school in September. The background for me and for my students is that they are physics and material science students, but the course is mathematics. Note that it is quite a large course, so around 100 students, and bear in mind that they are first-year students, so basically they don't have any university learning experience. Although they have been in the university for 2 months, they have, for example, hadn't had an exam. I have been teaching this course for 3 years now, and when I started to teach the course, the previous lecture had been videotaped. So I had quite good video lectures, and to say that this lecture was one of the best lecturers in our institute. So I started thinking, what should I do? Because I have great video lectures. If I'm going to lecture myself, probably I'm going to do worse than he did. Also, half of my students would like to hear me give the lectures and will not watch the video lectures. Half of them probably won't come to the class and watch the video lectures instead. But more importantly, I found that, as I said, they are first-year students, and they are not very experienced learners. The feeling that I got is that they don't know if they have learned something or not. Typical question before the exam is, can we solve last year's exam? So they think that if I solve one example, that gives me the answer. They don't have this holistic view of their knowledge. What do they know, and evaluating, do I know enough? And the other thing is that in mathematics, the attitude is like, can we solve another problem? Or why do you ask us theory? We can solve the problems, can't we? But as I said, the students are students in physics and material science. The theory is very important because based on that mathematical theory, physical theories are built on. So actually the problem solving is not so important. It is important, but not so important. Especially if we think about the future, when the students are going to be professionals, then they're going to have other tools. They're going to have computers solving the problems for themselves. So my goal was to achieve that they actually understood the theory and they understand the to achieve deeper learning in my students. And how did I approach the problem was that I set up a flipped classroom course. Yesterday, a show of hands showed that not many people are familiar with the flipped classroom setting. So I'm going to briefly describe it. As I said, I had the video lectures, so I have been giving the course in a way that I say to the students that watch the video lectures at home. You can do it at your own pace. You can slow it down, speed it up. You can pause it. You can do it at your own pace. And the most important thing is that this classical lecture gives basic knowledge, introduction into the thing. But I wanted to achieve deeper learning, so I can spend my classroom time on discussing these points that were difficult to comprehend, to understand, and to help my students understand the topic. Usually it is the other way around. We give the introduction in the classroom and then send the students home to understand the topic. Although I feel that understanding the topic is more difficult of a job and requires the requires the instruction from a teacher. So yes, a flipped classroom setting, so the students had already watched the video lectures. But there were some problems. There were some students that came to the class and they had really good notes. I mean, perfect notes. They had watched the video lecture, they had worked with it perfectly. They had stopped it, write down the definitions, circled their notes were very good in the sense that if you're writing them in a class, then you didn't maybe get something, you missed something. Even changing different color pens takes time. But they, in the home, they had enough time to change different colors, to think about it, how are they going to organize their notes. So some of the students had great notes. But the problem was that not all of the students were doing that. So I saw that some of the students were studying or using very good study methods. The others were not. And my challenge was how to make all of my students study at home and actually achieve deep learning there. So this year, I tried to do my course in this way, that first the students had the obligation to really study at home. To point out, I also wanted the students to use more books. In previous years, I saw that they only used the video lectures. Although I had also other study materials, books, and I found that some of the books were quite useful. And in lectures, some of the points were, as in a usual lecture, we spend too much time at one point or skip another, so I wanted my students also to use books. And this year, the first task for the students was, as always, watch the video lecture or read the book before coming to class. Use a self-reflection diary, so a learning diary, where you note what you have learned during this week. So I hope that this diary will achieve deeper learning in my students. We'll look at the diary in a moment. But to give the setting, then they came to the seminar on Friday, and there was a test on Monday on the previous week's topics. So to give the students feedback how they had learned, and as the test didn't take up all of the time, there was a lecture, so I spent it on explaining some of the most difficult points from the previous week if we didn't, if I felt that we didn't cover it enough in seminars, or give an overview what they should learn the next week. So, but the learning diary, it had five questions. The most important concept of this week topic was, and they had to write what they felt was the most important concept. So, questions that they had during this week. Connections. What connections can I make with my prior knowledge, prior learning? And then there were 2 questions on that week's topic. So those 2 questions always changed. There were also questions like what materials did I use, how much time did I spend on learning, and how would I myself evaluate my learning process during this week, or what grade would I give myself. But those were most of like an indication for me, but those 5 questions, the goal for those 5 questions were actually to guide the students' learning process. Now to results. I felt that I failed in this task, because actually when I looked through the students' learning diaries, the learning diaries were made online. Only about 10% of the answers could be considered deep learning or meaningful answers. At first I was a bit discouraged, but then I asked my students at the end of the lecture, so why? Actually, I asked what suggestions should you give for me, because the course is going to continue on the next semester, to improve the course. And I pointed out that I want feedback on the seminars, on the lectures, and on the learning diary. And what they pointed out is that the learning diary, the deadline for the learning diary was very bad for them. I imagined that if they have a seminar on Monday, a lecture on Monday, a seminar on Friday, and a learning diary basically Wednesday night to Thursday morning, so they will engage in the course throughout the week. But they felt it was tiresome, so they only filled in the learning diary so to just get the credits that they have filled in the learning diary. And only a handful of students were actually giving meaningful answers, or were doing what I assumed of them. But I didn't expect it, but the learning diary proved to be very useful for me, because as I looked through the diary, I saw what kind of mindsetting were the students in, what had they learned, and most importantly, what kind of misconceptions they had. So for Friday, for the seminar, I could tailor the seminars very specifically. So I saw what should I be doing in the seminars, and also if I felt, as the seminars was in groups, I saw that if there was some really big misconceptions or something that most of the students didn't get it. So something that I will explain to everybody in the lecture on Monday. Conclusions, or if you want to take my experience and learn something from it, then these would be my suggestions. First, video lectures can be a very powerful tool. I think the effort to make video lectures is not very great. Those video lectures that I have were made by just a camera sitting in a classroom and a lecturer giving a normal lecture. If you want to do it better, then of course it can be done better in shorter clips and with various audio-video help. But the simple video lectures, a camera in the corner of a classroom, it's very cheap, it's very easy, and if you're going to give a lecture for many years, then you can record something and play it back over the years. So I think video lectures are a powerful tool. I can't say that the video lectures have helped me increase the content of my course. You can imagine if something the students can watch at home, then I can add content to my lectures. Although the content of my course has increased, but I feel it has to increase the has the workload of my students. So the students are learning more in my course or spending more time on studying. So I wouldn't say that it's the video lectures that have helped to increase the content. Also, I can't say that the video lectures help to make the or help to save time, because now I'm spending my time, but I'm spending it on other things. For example, if I would be giving a normal lecture, then it's hard to get a good connection with 100 students. And I have more time to spend on each individual student. But what I can say is that video lectures can help you to achieve deeper learning. So my setup was that a flipped classroom setup that I gave them the video lectures to watch at home before the classroom, but it could be also used that a normal lecture and a difficult concept to understand, you can videotape it and a short clip and say to the students that if you go watch it at home. So I have an explanation on that, go watch it at home. So I think video lectures are a really powerful tool, and I encourage everybody to use them. Secondly, flipped classroom. I can't say that it's better, but I think it's as good as a normal classroom setting. I feel that it can be better, because I think we are all used to giving lectures. We are very good at giving lectures. There are many notes how to, or many points how to give a better lecture. We're not very experienced at novel teaching methods as flipped classroom design. And that's why I think it can be more beneficial than a normal lecture, but it takes practice. So if you fail at something or it's not better, I expected the results to be better. If it's not, then it's only because I think that it needs some getting used to from my part and also from my students' part. And as I said, I'm not giving up on the idea of an diary or a self-reflection diary, but at this point I can say that it's a powerful tool for getting feedback, and I hope that I have so many students that I don't have time to give individual feedback to all the students on what they have written in their learning diary, although I feel that in many cases I did want to do that because I saw that the misconceptions in the students and I wanted to correct them, but yeah, I don't have time to do to all the students. But think of the opportunities that the current infotechnological world is giving us and use them. So, and I would like to thank first Kaja, who helped me, who was one of the seminar leaders this year, so she gave me a lot of good advice how to improve the course. Marvi Remmik and Liina Lepp, who helped me who helped me come here today to make my own experiments a little bit more scientific or a little bit more research based. And of course I would like to thank my students because they are the greatest teacher that a person can have. And now I would like to get your questions, suggestions, comments. Thank you. I believe it is different for a video lecture in a classroom and at home. I have gotten feedback from the students that they say, some students that say that the video lectures are a great learning tool, that they can watch it at their own time. Maybe it's in the evening. They're not a morning person. They don't want to come to a classroom. They can watch it at their own time. They can watch it at their own pace. They can speed up something. If there is a definition in the lecture, then they can pause it, rewind it, and play it back. So get the exact definition, something that you can do in a normal classroom or with a video in a classroom. But those were 1.5 hour long video lectures, so playing it back in a normal classroom would not be meaningful. In classrooms, short video clips and a different setup will be beneficial, and I think a video with a discussion afterwards in a classroom setting would be more beneficial than let the students watch a short clip at home and make their own give them a task on a video lecture at home, because the idea of sharing the knowledge or sharing how different people perceived that video lecture is lost. So, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I presume your lectures were 90 minutes long.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the second is, does it make any sense if you would provide your lectures with some kind of handouts that would make them, well, that would enable them to follow them perhaps a little bit easier? I quite liked your idea of all these definitions and things. And I haven't used that many video lectures myself, but I
Yeah, we are talking about the normal lecture and how we can make a normal classical lecture better. One idea would be to give handouts, let the students fill out the handouts. There are many ideas how to improve a classical lecture, but the idea, or I'm saying that we can look beyond the classical lecture, and the point is that that we are very good at improving the classical lecture, but there are many ideas. But I feel that there's a complete field unexplored, and most part it is how to make our students' individual study time meaningful. And one idea is flipped class. One suggestion is flipped classroom, but I feel that a lot of practice or research should be put into it, how to make it as effective as normal classroom lectures. Yeah.
In which program do you make your video lectures?
There were just it was not me, it was the previous lecture, but it was just a camera, it was edited and just an AVI format you can play in any video player.
I'm using also video lectures. I'm using statistics in Tallinna College, and I have made video lectures with Kujundada. It's your face, your voice, and your
Slides, yeah. Yeah.
slides or something. And I also give students in file my handouts or something, and then I can do some kind of notes there. And, they give me feedback that it's very useful, because I'm talking very fast. It's my problem, personal problem. And then they say that it's good to watch again lectures.
Yeah.
Made video graphics, and this is kind of key.
Actually, I do agree that I think that this setting that I have in my course is not the best one. If you're familiar with Khan Academy, there the video lectures are 10 max 15 minutes long. I think that if you want to make a really powerful teaching tool, then the video lecture should be short, concentrating on only one concept, and then followed by some student assignments. But I just want to say that making these short video clips or these study materials could be time consuming, and as we all know, we don't have too much time. So I'm just saying that if you don't have too much time, then finding a camera is not a difficult thing. Although I would like to point out that what makes those video lectures very good is that there was a cameraman also behind the camera, so he could zoom in on the lecture if needed, zoom on the blackboard if needed, zoom in on the screen if needed, and that made those video lectures much better than just a camera sitting in the classroom. But I'm just saying that you can think about it. I imagine it's really cheap to just put a camera in the classroom, record it. Even if the video lecture is not very good, I think it will give you an excellent study material for yourself to see how you gave a lecture, because I have also been videotaped, and it's really very frightening to watch yourself give a video lecture. Yeah, it's horrible. But after 2 weeks, when you have the courage to watch it, then it's really great. Yeah, question.
I like very much your idea with online tasks for students. So now I think also for my lecture special to do some online tasks. But I have seen already other systems which present the idea that students know you based on theory, then seminars, and then lecture puts really exercises which can
So basically, asking how I'm evaluating my students at the end of the course. So yeah, I have classical problems that I have to solve, but also I have exam questions, and they're quite open-ended questions, or nothing that I have, or I have not seen mathematicians, pure mathematicians, give like questions, describe. I'm not asking any proofs of theorems or something. Describe how you understand it. Explain it in common words. Explain it to your grandma. So that kind of questions where I'm expecting the students to, or I want to see if the student has actually understood the topic and concept. Or not. Oh, of course, there are exam questions that are simple answer, knowledge-based also.
For example, if you do the lecture, so the such questions, when you need to write, so this is much more unique for every student, so you must give everyone. So basically, when you have the exercise with the right answer, this will be easy to rework it.
Yeah.
So, because when you have 100 students, you read everyone one by one, you understand, okay, in the end, it's like half of the day. Or
Oh, you may in the learning diaries you meant if I have a questions, if it's only one answer, one correct answer, then it would be very easy to correct them, or yes, it would be easier, but the thing that I want to accomplish is deeper student learning. And I feel that these short answers, correct or not correct, actually don't achieve that student learning. It gets them to that point that what's the right or wrong answer, or I'm just guessing. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I want them to struggle a bit to search for the answer. Actually, I'm giving questions that are not in the textbook. They have to figure it out based on the based on the knowledge in the textbook, and then they also have to give an reasoning why they gave such an answer. Of course, it's harder to read, but I feel it's giving me much more information how my students are learning. I have to figure out the other part also, how to give them meaningful feedback with such a large course.
So thank you very much for your interesting presentation. I think you have really developed an interesting combination of how to use different learning tools. Probably there might be some other questions, but I think we need to stop here. There are other poster sessions starting, which I encourage you to participate. So thank you for interesting presentation, and maybe if somebody wants to still ask something, you can continue.
Over the coffee table.
Okay,
yeah.
yes.
Thank you very much.
And the presentations, the poster presentations are starting now also, so please visit them too. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, so the last session of this interesting event is about to start. And I am very proud to present you the next speaker. I know you are waiting now for these important facts about her research background. I have something to tell you about Susan. She's very good in innovative thinking. And that has been proven over the course of this conference, because her suitcase arrived just last night. Her favorite topics to read and study are the spontaneous human combustion and vampires. And it's understandable, because these are so dangerous creatures, that she is fascinated about distant education. She actually has participated in many, many TV shows where she presents in TV studio some topics and people at home can learn. And there is a good story I heard, which happened somewhere in the US, where a big fan of Susan met her in a supermarket and approached Susan with great enthusiasm and admiration and said, "I looked your show, I watched your show last night." And like a real professional educator, Susan answered to the fan, "What were you doing last night watching TV? Get yourself a life." And now, as this is the age of modern technology, Susan has found her niche. She has wrote a book, Blackboard for Dummies. And now she's traveling around the globe teaching people how to use the Blackboard. So I hope Susan will give us some hints at the end of her presentation. So please, Susan.
Introduction, yes. I started in distance education before there was an internet. Dinosaurs were still on Earth, I believe. And so one of the things that I did was I taught distance classes, and I did that on cable television. And so, yes, it was very strange to have someone approach me in the supermarket as I put the six-pack of beer behind my back. It's like, yes, you did see me teaching that class. Yes, that was kind of an awkward moment, but I did feel like I wondered if I had a big fan club out there that I didn't know about. So, unfortunately, I haven't planned to talk to you about how to use the Blackboard, but instead, what we're going to be talking about this morning is a topic that I have recently become very interested in, which has to do with, in a sense, like my topic says, how to be your own best boss. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I think that there is a lot we are learning about how we can sort of manage ourselves that is very important for our students to also learn so that they can be successful in our classes. This is why I said, how to be your own best learning boss. And this particular quote about the talent without discipline being like an octopus on roller skates. And if you think about that image, there's a lot of things going on, but we don't really know what's going to happen. This topic has sometimes been described as the interaction between skill and will. So let's see what the first thing that we're going to be talking about here. What's one of the first things we say? Oh, in order to accomplish something, in order to accomplish my goals, I need motivation. Sort of like I need a bicycle or I need a new sweater. That it's something someone gives you, okay? It's something from outside. You know, we have these jumper cables that they put on our head and so it's something that I need, motivation, or I have no willpower, as though that's some internal mystical substance which occurs in some people but not in others. And my favorite, I'm not self-disciplined. Well, this is obviously a character flaw and you can do nothing about it. No, that's not true at all. It's not a character flaw. This is not the kind of thing that we say, well, if you have no self-discipline, too bad. That's not the case. These are not fixed characteristics or traits. Unfortunately, many of our students think that they are. And so when they think about goal attainment and they think about being successful in their classes, they may come up with these ideas about themselves as learners. You know, how many of you made New Year's resolutions? How many of you make New Year's resolutions? Come on, be honest. Yes, yes, okay. Well, the research on New Year's resolutions is rather discouraging, okay? Most of them don't last. Very few people are successful with their New Year's resolutions. Maybe they would say to themselves, well, I need motivation, or I have no willpower. Okay, I'm not self-disciplined. New Year's resolutions is like our students coming into the new semester of classes. They're ready, they're eager, and then somehow that resolution doesn't always pan out. So why is that? You know, we often think, well, you know, it's just something that our students need to find within themselves. And in fact, that's not actually true. So what is it? Well, it's what we call self-regulation. And when we talk about learning, we call it self-regulated learning. The good news is that self-regulation is not who you are or what you have. It's what you do. Because if you think about it, who you are and what you have are sometimes out of your control. But what you do is in your control. And so we're going to talk about what is that control. You know, one of the things that the people who are around me a lot get very tired of hearing me say is, think about what your students are doing. I firmly believe, as an instructional designer, that we should constantly be thinking about what is it that students are doing to learn. Not, what am I doing to teach? What am I doing for the test? But what are my students doing to learn the content? What are they doing to show me they know the content? That they've developed those skills. So this idea of behavior is a very important one. It's especially important for our students. And if we think about this, these purposeful actions, self-regulation as purposeful actions about our thinking, our feeling, our behavior, specifically intended to help us get to our goals. Now think about students coming into the university from a very structured secondary school environment. Suddenly they're in an environment where they have a lot of time, less oversight of their activity. If they don't have these self-regulating behaviors that will enable them to achieve their goals, this is going to be a very difficult time for them. So a lot of times we think to ourselves, well, they just need motivation. This is true, but what they really need are to learn some of these skills. And these are just examples, but these first four, that I say are reliable predictors of student success, these are found by extensive research on every one of these to, in fact, be great predictors of student success. Notice that intelligence is not up there. What do you know? Okay, intelligence is not fixed. Okay? But these are behaviors that we can do. So accurate attribution, in other words, if you're successful at something, why were you successful? What do you attribute that to? Do you attribute that to, well, I was lucky? Or, well, I've always been good at math. Okay. In fact, what we need to help our students understand is when they are successful in our classes, it's because of things that they did. They studied hard, they used careful study strategies, they managed their time well, etc. Time management. There's been a lot of research about time management, and it says this is one of the best predictors of student success in college. It's a better predictor than, for example, in the United States, many students take the SAT test as preparation for, or before they go to the university. Time management is a better predictor of academic success than the SAT test. Isn't that crazy? Monitoring our own comprehension. In other words, how am I doing? Am I getting this? Sort of evaluating ourselves as we go along. This is another predictor of student success. And goal orientation. Do I have a goal in mind for this course? for this learning. What we found is that self-regulated learning leads to deep processing, persistence, which is really the definition of motivation. Motivation is the tendency to persist in an activity. And then intrinsic reinforcement, and that's the kind of reinforcement we want our students to have, is that intrinsic internal kind. So if you're feeling sort of smug about this, right about this time when you think, oh, well, you know, my students, they don't have these skills, but I obviously do. Just reflect back on all those New Year's resolutions you've made and how successful you were with those, because maybe this, you know, you can use these skills for yourself too. Many of us, though, forget that the reason we are here, the reason we got this far, is because we developed these skills at some point. Many of our students do not. Now, it's really, really important in these times for our students to have these skills, because the requirements for them to be autonomous learners is greater than ever. Many of our students are going to have to take courses online, especially as part of lifelong learning. Those courses may require them to be much more autonomous, much more accountable for their own behavior and for their own learning. They need to get those skills of self-regulation in place to be successful at that. It's also a time in our society where there are more distractions than ever. Okay? If our students don't have good skills for time management and focusing their attention and staying on task and having a good goal orientation, it's going to be very easy for them to be distracted by the many, many other opportunities that are so easily available to them. So keep in mind that the reason you are here is because you had these skills. Not all of our students do. Some people consider this good motivation. I find it a little harsh. My math teacher attaches McDonald's applications to failed tests. That's a little harsh, but maybe that reinforces the idea, okay, that if you're not successful in this class, your career options may be limited. So what are we talking about with self-regulation? Well, we're really looking at 4 major areas. That idea of planning, so forethought, thinking ahead about what your goals are, what you might want to do long term, looking at operating and monitoring as part of the strategies that we're going to employ for achieving our goals, and finally then reflecting on our particular success. So let's talk about planning. The first step is to have goals, and I particularly love this. It's a little tricky to read. It says, this kid is going places. The assignment was, what are 3 things you want to do in the future? 1, get a girlfriend. 2, kiss her. And 3, rule the world. So it is important that our goals be realistic. So I think this kid has 2 out of 3. I think that's actually realistic. List the first 2. Well, actually, maybe, I don't know, just pick any 2. You know. So when we talk about planning, goal setting is very, very important. Think back to those New Year's resolutions. I'll bet you've had New Year's resolutions that said things like, lose weight, get healthy, stop smoking. There's nothing wrong with those resolutions, but they're not very specific. Okay? They're not maybe reflective of the challenges that you might face. Okay? And in some cases, the New Year's resolutions we set don't, in fact, reflect the long-term reality of what it's going to take to get there. So for our students, a big part of goal setting is identifying goals that, in fact, are not what I would say sort of fixed single performance goals. My goal for this class is to get an A. The problem with goals like that, you know, or in the New Year's Eve resolution, my goal is to become a supermodel. Okay, not going to happen, right? Because that kind of goal is fixed on one specific sort of outcome that is really an all or nothing activity. If I don't get that, my self-worth is going to suffer and my confidence. If my goals instead are to eat more healthy meals, okay, that's actually a pretty good goal, because that's a goal that I can progress on. That's a goal that indicates improvement over time, not I'm going to lose 50 pounds. Okay? But the goal is I'm going to do something that requires gradual achievement of milestones. So what we want our students to do is focus on goals that are related to improvement, that are related to learning, not just one learning outcome. In terms of, sort of that operating or the identifying the strategies, helping our students identify the activities that will help them be successful in your course is very important. Unfortunately, most of our students study when they are on their own with a very trial and error method of learning. Now, that works out okay for your high-achieving students, because what we find is that the high achievers, in fact, learn good study strategies, and they develop some of these regulatory behaviors like time management. What that does, however, is, in a sense, it's sort of a positive cycle, because in a sense, it's like the rich get richer. Those students discover those strategies and find that they really work, and they get confident, and then they do even better, and they find more strategies. The downside of that is that your students who don't discover on their own good study strategies or good time management behaviors, in fact, do worse and worse. Because what they find is, if they're not using good study strategies, they can study just as long or longer than their peers and still not be successful. So identifying good learning strategies is very important. And as instructors, this is something we can help with in helping our students to identify what those are. Now, they're going to vary for your various classes, but even things like helping your students learn how to take good notes. We assume that our students are good note takers. Most of our students do what I call note copying, not note taking. Note copying is where they write every single word down, like they're stenographers, right? I don't know if any of you have seen the movie, I want to say, is it Almost Famous? The one about the rock band and the journalist who's traveling with the rock band. Well, in that movie, there's a minor character who's a college professor. And her son is traveling with a rock and roll band. He's a journalist, but he's very young. He's a teenager. So he's traveling as a journalist with a rock band. And the professor's very upset about this. And she's in her class, and she's lecturing, and she just finally says, "I'm sorry, I just can't do this. My son has been kidnapped by a rock and roll band." And the students sit there for a moment, and then they write it down. It's like, yes, note copying. It's like, well, she said it. It must be important. I don't know. What about this? So helping your students learn to take good notes. That's something we can model in our class that is not going to add a lot to your instructional time, but can really pay off for your students. Things like providing some structure and some guidance about what to do with course content. We do things like we say, okay, read chapter 7, and the students go and they read chapter 7, but did you explain why? What should they look for? Again, getting back to the doing, what should they be able to do with the content in chapter 7? Should they look for key points? Should they try to identify inconsistencies in the material or biases? Should they be able to analyze something or solve problems at the end or summarize the key points in their own words? What is it we want them to do? So being very clear about some of those study strategies and helping students identify those that are going to be useful for your class can be very, very useful. Preparing for obstacles refers to that idea of what if temptation comes along. There is some amazing research about the value of identifying these what-if strategies. Most of it, however, has been done with people, for example, who are trying to quit smoking or trying to quit drinking or trying to lose weight. And it's very simple. It's sort of an if-then statement. If I am presented with, someone brings cake to work. Okay, if there is cake at work, then I will, and in advance you think of what you're going to do about that. You say, I will eat 1/2 of a piece of cake, or I will eat an apple instead. Now that just seems so minor and silly, but in fact, it works. So maybe what we do is ask our students, when you plan to study, what are you going to do if someone says, oh, don't study tonight, let's go out instead? If my friends invite me out when I had planned to study, what will I do? Again, a simple strategy, but in fact it works. Some of these things are kind of amazing. They're almost magical. And then finally, preparing their environment and organizing their resources. I'm always amazed where students end up studying. They end up having study places that are uncomfortable, that are not well lit, that are noisy. Many of our students still buy into that idea that they can multitask. They can do many things at one time. They cannot. Okay? Don't believe all the hype about digital natives and how great they are at multitasking. They are not. Okay? None of us are. Humans are not good at multitasking. So helping our students understand that and discouraging that activity is very important. Operating and monitoring, these are the two areas that sort of occur simultaneously. This is when you're actually, now that you've set your goal and you've moved forward sort of down your success path, paying attention to cues and developing habits. Cues are triggers in our environment that help us remember, oh, right, I was going to go for a run. Oh, right, I was going to go to the gym. Or I was going to study. Okay? What are those cues? What are those triggers that you have purposely in your head said, when I see my book sitting on the desk, I'm going to sit down and read a chapter. Or, when it is 4 o'clock, then I know it's time to study math. So what are those cues? Deciding on those up front and then doing that. I have a friend who puts her running shoes right beside the bed, so when she gets out of bed in the morning, there they are. That's a cue. I have another friend, not everybody can do this, but it works really well for her. She sleeps in her running clothes. So there's even less obstacles to get herself out the door. Okay? She wears her, her shorts and her t-shirt and whatever, and she sleeps in, and when she gets up, who cares if you're running and your clothes are wrinkled? For some people, that is a fashion show, but for her, she's fine with that. So what are those cues? Using those strategies, so using those study strategies that have been developed, and then using the monitoring information. And as we think about monitoring, this is just keeping track of your progress. Think about, okay, you made a New Year's resolution. I'm going to lose weight. Okay, what's monitoring? Stepping on the scale. There's a reason they say weigh yourself frequently when you're trying to lose weight, because it gives you monitoring information about how you're doing. Okay? Maybe not every day. There's some discussion about that, but maybe every other day. You weigh yourself to get feedback about how you're doing. Have you ever taken a class and about 3 or 4 weeks in, you're like, am I getting this? I don't know if I'm understanding this. As instructors, we can help our students by providing self-assessment tasks, little self-tests that they don't get credit for it, but they can go in and take these little quizzes online just so they know, okay, all right, I'm getting it, I'm doing fine. When I first started suggesting that strategy to faculty at my institution, a lot of them said, oh, my students will hate that, they'll never take them. In fact, they love it because it provides benchmarking information that they might not get otherwise. So having that ability to evaluate your own progress is very, very important when we think about how do we reach our goals. Then regulating your effort. That's kind of fancy language for make yourself do it. Okay. Many of our students, as in the talks that we heard yesterday, many of our students come to us possibly with not great self-regulation, or rather effort regulation skills. We see strange attributions in the sense that their parents may tell them, oh, you know, if you didn't do well, it's because she's a terrible teacher, okay? Instead of saying, well, you didn't do well on that test. Let's talk about how long did you study and what did you do to study? How much time did you spend? Did you practice these skills before the test? So really, instead of focusing on the effort that the students should have been engaged in, there has been some movement, especially in the United States, the self-esteem movement that focuses on, we just want to make sure everyone feels good about themselves, instead of focusing on maybe we should be looking at those behaviors that we know lead to success. So we have some students who are coming to us, at least in the United States, who do not have great effort regulation skills. We see that's part of the whole helicopter parenting, the parents that hover. You know, at my institution, we use Blackboard, this kind and the online kind. And I have had parents call me because their university offspring, their student, their child, is struggling with using Blackboard. And I'm like, have your student call it. What, you know, I had one mother call me from her son's dormitory bedroom saying, I can't log into Blackboard on my son's computer. I said, well, you're not supposed to log in on your son's Blackboard account. Well, he gave me his information so that I could do this. And oh my gosh, we need to talk about information security with that student, obviously. But also what that says is that student hasn't routinely been held accountable. And that's something that we know we have to help them learn. So effort regulation. Then figuring out, do you need help? You know, for many of us, depending on the goal that we're trying to attain, well, we might say, okay, I thought I could quit smoking on my own. I thought I was strong, whatever. I need help. Okay? For our students, asking for help is very, very difficult sometimes. So reinforce for your students that, first of all, it's not a bad thing to ask for help. It's a really good thing to ask for help, and make it as easy as possible for them to come to you for help. If your students hesitate to come to you in person, I strongly suggest one of the easiest things that you can do is have online office hours. And it doesn't require anything special. You can say, I'll be on Skype every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 1 to 3. So you have the Skype window open. You can do other stuff. If somebody logs in, if a student logs in on Skype, ding, oh, they're there. You can answer their question. The student doesn't have to come to your office and sit there face to face and say, I'm stupid. Because that's the way they see it. You know, asking for help is admitting that there's something wrong with them. So we have to get past that stigma of getting help. And it's important that we help our students to do that. Reflecting. We often are not good at reflecting, and our students are not good at reflecting at what worked in the class. And I will say that as a teacher, this is something I have to make myself do at the end of the semester. The time to think about how well your class went as a teacher is right at throughout the class, but especially at the end, to sit down and think, what really worked? What didn't work? What do I need to change? What most of us want to do is close that book and put it away and say, I'm not teaching that for another year or another 2 years or whenever. I'll think about it then. The time to think about it is right afterward. And it's the same thing with our student. After they turn in that paper, after they get those test results back, then reflecting, what worked? Did that study strategy work for me? Should I try something different next time? What's the next task I have coming up? We're not often very good at that, but you can help your students do that by requiring them that they do something like turn in a simple paragraph about their study strategies and how they felt that affected their performance on that test or their activity, that assignment. It could be 2 sentences. But this tells you something about how they're studying so that you can then help them with that. As a group, you can say, a lot of you have been, using stuff like flashcards for studying, and that's okay. That helps you with memorization, but let's talk about some strategies that might help you really get at the heart of the content. So that helps you in a sense of where they are. The other thing that it does is it requires that the student think about their thinking. And we really want to encourage that kind of metacognitive activity. Because when they have to sit down, and even just to write a couple of those sentences, they're going to have to think about, well, what did I do to study? And did it work? Do I feel confident about this course content? So it does require then that the students think about that. And otherwise, they might not think about it at all. They're just ready to move on to the next activity and possibly use those same ineffective study strategies that they were using before. The other thing that we need to think about is, how do we as teachers attribute our students' success? So it's always difficult, as a teacher. You want to say, wow, great job. We need to make sure that we reinforce that they did well because of something they did, because they studied hard, because they put in the time, because they were good collaborators with their group, because they challenged themselves, because they got feedback, because they went for help, because they set a time management schedule, and on and on and on. Okay? Something as simple as I said, setting a time schedule for studying. I read a study that completely knocked me off my chair that said students who, all the students in this very large class, all they were asked to do, like half of them, right? Same class, half of them had to write down when they planned to study the following week, when and where. They wrote it down, and they gave it to the teacher. That was it. Not only did those students actually study longer than their peers, they did better. That's it. They wrote down when they were going to study and where. Another study had a group of college freshmen who were asked to write an essay over the Christmas holiday break. They had to send it in on December 27th. Okay, not a great time that you want to sit down and write an essay, right? But what they did was they had a very large group, hundreds of students. And half of them, they said, all right, now when you do this, oh, and by the way, there was a reward. There was some monetary. They gave them money if they actually turned it in. Okay, not a huge amount, 25 bucks or something like that. So half of these students, though, they said to them, write down when you plan to write the essay. And so the student got to choose. It had to be before December 27th when they had to email it in. Half of those students were asked to write down when they were going to write the essay. That's it. Everything else was the same. The assignment was the same, the deadline, the cash payment, everything. More than twice as many of the students who wrote down when they would write the essay turned it in. More than double. You think something so simple. It would add this much time to your class to say to your students, write down when you're going to study this week and where. But boy, can it have big payoffs. Like I said, some of this stuff is almost magical. When you read it, it's like, really? That's it? So having that kind of plan in place is very important. Let's think about New Year's resolutions again. Okay? You're going to be more successful with your healthy eating plan if you decide ahead of time, this is what I'm going to eat this week. These are the things I'm going to buy at the supermarket. You make a list. Okay? You are going to be more successful than if you say, okay, this week I'm really going to focus on eating healthy. You might, but you're going to do a lot better if you have a plan and you write it down. I'm not sure exactly what the writing it down is, but it makes a difference. Not just saying to the students, now think about when you're going to study. Writing it down is some kind of commitment. Okay? So yeah, these are the kinds of things that you think, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it does take planning and thinking about it. And again, I want to mention one more time this idea of attribution that just occurred to me that I wanted to mention. With accurate attributions, again, we emphasize to our students what behaviors got you to that point, not you did really well on the test, well, guess you got lucky. That's not a good attribution to our students. Okay? We want to reinforce those behaviors of self-regulation, things like time management, of setting goals, okay, of monitoring our progress, of reflecting. Oh, where's my last slide? Uh-oh. Well, let's see here. Can you bring up my slideshow? There it is. Oh, did I hide that by accident? Oh, could you unhide that, please? Thank you. I'm not sure I hid that slide by accident. So, in summary, I want to just mention that, first of all, you know, if you're sitting there thinking, my students know this, you know, I don't need to worry about this, remember that because it seems obvious to you, it's not obvious to them. The reason it's obvious to you is that you got this far because you have these skills, at least some of them. Now, maybe the time management and the monitoring and all of that, maybe you don't have all of those, but you've got some of them or you wouldn't have gotten this far. Okay? The other thing is that remember that our traditional educational systems typically do not reinforce these behaviors, especially when students come from the secondary school where their time is very structured for them. You're told when to study what and how, and when to turn things in, and where and with whom you work, where you sit and go to class, and when you go, and it's very, very structured. So students are not required in the secondary level to have these kinds of time management skills. Then they come to the university, and what? We throw them into this, okay, you go to class this many hours a week, and then you have all this free time. So we don't have the kind of educational system that is in fact going to reinforce these behaviors. So we need to help our students get these behaviors, not just because, you know, not everyone has them, but because we are living in a time where they are needed now more than ever. And finally, as we think about this, you know, we might say, well, you know, yeah, but one of my favorite phrases, the best time to plant a tree, 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree, right now. Okay? It's too late to plant a tree 20 years ago, but we can do one now. We can plant one now. Okay? So I hope you will go back to your schools. Think about planting a tree, maybe just a seed. Okay? Thank you. Because I know that myself and Christian are the only thing standing between you and lunch, I actually kept my presentation short, so we will have time for a few questions if anyone has any, or we can save them until after the very end.
So, and I am looking, yeah, may I have a microphone, please? This one. You know, someone among of you dared to have a joke about me yesterday. And that person will, I told her that the revenge is coming. So right now she has the right to ask the first question. Piret, please.
Maybe I should make another joke about you, Martin. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sorry, at the moment I don't have a question.
Okay, but Margus always have, and I know Torni always have, but let's give it to Margus now.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say that
despite trying to teach these things for to the students in computer science for the past 5 years now, basically your presentation still blew my mind, so I have an idea for at least one more lecture right now. Are you familiar with theories of Baumeister about self-control being learnable? And,
yes.
It's just something that seemed somewhat missing from here, but actually, my main question, however, is how do you actually get all of this data to students so that they actually react to it? So you mentioned one simple trick, but do you do it yourself? Do you try to do it yourself? And what are the other things that you actually use in getting these methods to students?
Yeah, that's a good question. And yes, Roy Baumeister has done a lot of research with self-regulation, not just with learning, but with a variety of activities. So self-regulation for people who are alcoholics, for people who are trying to quit smoking, for people who want to live a healthy life, for people who have obsessive control disorder, and trying to help therapeutically as well as simply, trying to lead a better life in terms of developing self-regulating behaviors, what we might call self-control or self-discipline. And yes, I think it is important that we need to focus on specific strategies with our students. So, as I said, identifying when and where they're going to study, having a study place that is quiet, that is free from distractions, encouraging them to do that, modeling some of those behaviors for your students in class. There is nothing wrong with saying to your students, when I learned this, it was a real struggle, but I finally got it. You know what that does is it says to your students, if you work hard, you can get it. I'm not some magical person that I can work these equations. I didn't just get born knowing them. I had to struggle just like you are, but I learned it, which means you can too. So, explaining that and modeling that behavior for your students to say, your success is going to be related to your behaviors, how hard you work, the way you study, identifying good study strategies, managing your time, monitoring your progress. And so really focusing on those strategies, the kinds of study skills that you think would be useful for your discipline. Whether it's, I want you to read a book chapter and be able to identify the key points. I want you to read this business case and be able to analyze it. Really looking at what should students be doing when they study? What should they be looking for in that content? Not just being exposed to it, but, we learn by doing. So what are our students doing to learn? So thinking about, here's the course content. Now, here's what I'd like you to do with it. Here's how I'd like you to manipulate these ideas. Here's how I'd like you to analyze or problem solve or design or produce, whatever it is we want them to be able to do. So building those study strategies specifically around the kind of thinking skills we want our students to engage in is very important. But, many of our students never learned really good study skills. They may have been fairly gifted in their secondary school and never had to study hard. And so they come to the university and now it's a little bit harder, but they don't have the study skills because they never had to learn them. So modeling those in class by saying, all right, let's do some deep reading. Let's do some reading for comprehension. Let's all look together at this paragraph. What are the main points? Okay. And then asking, do you agree with that? What do you think is another point? How would you argue against that? What do you think this other researcher would say about that? So really modeling that kind of comprehension for reading that we want our students to do when they're on their own can be very useful. In terms of other disciplines, things like when you are solving problems, if you get to a point and you don't know what to do next, what are you going to do then? How might you, work through that activity? Would you backtrack and try to identify your errors? Would you work with a study partner? Would you do peer teaching? So yes, focusing on those specific learning strategies is very important. They're going to vary from one course to another, but the focus has to be, what kind of thinking do you want your students to be doing?
And there is just time for one more question, and who might that be? Maybe Torni.
Yes, thank you very much. You said pretty much what I wanted you to elaborate on. My thinking is, it's all about this attributing success to what you do. I really agree with you there. But got me thinking about how we treat each other. So now I'm talking about academics to academics. How much we personalize, attribute things to person when we talk about collegial success, when we talk about controversies and things like that. It's very common that I hear in my university that colleague is doing this because he is like that, or he is thinking like that. Or when we we read research papers sometimes that look so neat. It looks like they were sort of magically formed out of the air by a brilliant researcher, when it can actually be years and years of hard work and lots of trouble and failures behind them. But we rarely talk about those things, so it was just a thinking. If we are about to modeling this to our students, we might also try to think a little bit about how we interact with each other inside academia. Otherwise, we cannot in the long run model that, I think. So that was just a comment.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that tendency to apply those labels is maybe universal. Oh, this person is that, or, I'm bad at math, or, I'll just always be like this, and instead of thinking about what can I do to change that? And, as educators, we can take one of two positions. We can say, well, these are my students and they're just useless and whatever. Or we can, we can moan and groan about how terrible the world is, that these are our students we have today, and they're so much worse than when I was a student. Or we can try to do something about it and focus on what is it that we can all do to improve things.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Susan.
Thank you.
And here is it.
Thank you very much.
So now, we come to the last speaker of this event, and I also have a couple of words to say about Christian. I have a friend, a journalist, and she has done a couple of programs with Christian, and whenever we have spoken about Christian, she goes like, "Oh, Christian." So, because, and she explains why. There is a reason to do that. Mental reason, intelligent reason. But Christian has background in physical education and sports. And as his research interests nowadays are in human performance and human and machine interaction in the future, I bet that Christian was thinking all the time during the last presentation, yeah, this is now, but in 50 years there would be a robot speaking to robots, and we all would be on the beach in Canary Islands. So, Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, and I'm very honored to be here, despite the fact that the feeling has been pickled in the high level of stress hormones for the last couple of days. Because I'm in the row, and then the last presenter in the row of excellent and distinguished experts, that the qualification that I can't claim to be my own. And also thinking about the initial call when the organizers asked whether I'm ready to give a presentation. I thought quite a lot about it, and we discussed forward and then back, and they were a little bit afraid that my talk may be too dark. But thanks to Susan's introduction, I can build up the logics of maybe some black thoughts I may present, and these are connected to the blackboard educational tool. But it also depends on the way you look on the blackboard, because the chalk is white, and the more you use the chalk, the the more optimistic you should become. So who am I? I'm a teacher, and why I did select this kind of heading to my presentation was actually I stumbled upon the question mark. And I thought that, okay, higher education has been a higher way of educating people for last 1,000 years. How can we question it, whether it's a higher level of learning? It should be, it must be an exclamation mark. So I started to think that what's the background, why we are nowadays so much unsure about higher level of learning in higher education organizations. And this is something that that is about the culture we are living in. And again, who am I? I'm a teacher, I'm full of knowledge, and my students are, of course, empty vessels. But surely this kind of approach is running on the rocks, and we can say also that students nowadays are full of sheepfold, spurious information and so on, and it's harder to gain their attention and to add some value while competing in new settings of attention economy. Economy where person's attention is a liquid asset, toyed by free ads, cheap tablets, and everywhere accessible net. And at the same time, the expectations for teachings continue to rise. But also the essence of these expectations are changing. So why I'm interested in the topic of education, I can look at on the issue from my personal point of view, because my own position in or demise of higher education has been argued for at least a decade. And it is comparable, for example, to Lance Armstrong's denial of reality. And like champions, universities are finally losing their monopoly on higher education. They have to show the real value proposition. And talking about education, last decades are a proof that higher learning has a second row seat in a university culture. Most resources and quality metrics in universities have been directed toward research, not learning, not teaching. Now there is a brewing scandal that universities produce a product for which there is no market, and develop skills for which there is a diminishing demand. Learners are looking for alternatives because they buy value that is defined by their constantly changing life situation. And maybe teachers are looking for ways of prolonging the misery, accepting novel ways of doing their work on the basis of faith and speculations. Faith in IT, the devil who has caused all these troubles. Now, what are the signs of changing culture? It has said that the time for average is over. In the past, workers with average skills, doing an average jobs, could earn an average lifestyle. But today, time for average is done. Being average just won't earn you what it used to. It can't, when so many more employers have so much more access to so much more above average human and machine resources. And there is a pressure to automate every job that needs constant average attention. Therefore, everyone needs to find their extra, their unique value contribution that makes them stand out in whatever is their field of employment. And they must do it regularly, as the circumstances are not standing still. And we can see that the same pressure is reaching also the doors of university. At the first contact, e-learning will swallow teachers of average abilities. Therefore, we need to develop new kind of university professor. Most probably he or she is not even a professor, whose merits are calculated on the basis of research, not on the merits of teaching. He must be a teacher with a big T. First step on this direction is awareness and appreciation. Yes, we can say that new technology has been eating jobs forever, and it always will. But there has been an acceleration, increase of rate of human wants. Can you see the effect of university? You can see all kinds of innovations in the life of human being for the last 10,000 years. But before the universities, nothing happened in the number of persons in the population. Whether it is caused by university or the university is a sign of the development, but you can see the critical point of the university's placement in the history. Can this population growth go on indefinitely? Some say yes, hoping that human inventiveness and the rapid pace of technological change preclude insurmountable limits to human population growth. And others will say no, because Earth possesses a finite amount of possible resources, and we've been squandering these resources quite quickly. And universities torn between these quarreling sides. And now we must ask, does the academia have the keys for solution? Or will it be the victim of the success of its own doing? Recent history shows us that the internet is a great destroyer of any traditional business that relies on the sale of information, the big part of the university's core business. Well, technological drive has also had an impact on population employment structure. For example, from the statistics of United States, in the last 10 years only, it has been shed workers so fast that they erased almost all the gains of the previous 70 years of employment. Roughly 1 out of every 3 manufacturing jobs, somewhere totaling 6 million jobs, have been disappeared during the last 10 years. And there will always be change, and some of the jobs will disappear abroad, and somewhere will be taken over by machines we invent. And there will always be a change, new jobs, new products, new services, but one thing that we know for sure is that with each advance in human condition, the best jobs will require workers to have more and better education, to make themselves above average. Now the university has started to invent the way of teaching and learning, and the question is, of course, will it end out inventing a teaching robot? Who knows? Following couple of pictures are from London of a recent discussion between students and government over the topic of cost of higher education. French businessman and economist Jean-Baptiste Say stated that products are paid for with other products, and the glut can take place only when there are too many means of production applied to one kind of product and not enough to another kind. Teaching is a product, and it seems that there are problems in production of education. Say also said that market tries to react promptly to overproduction of certain goods to avoid time-consuming crises. Major instrument is a price regulation, reduction of the price of overproduced goods and rise in the underproduced ones. However, some men like Maynard Keynes demands involvement of the state and stimulation of the market via central control, and this is where the central bank concept comes from. And we can see that attempts of governments trying to save revenues of big universities. They are less successful in generating jobs for graduates entering the labor market, and as a result, students are defaulting on their loans in record numbers. However, there is also an altered cost-related problem, and I will cite it from the news. A student who attended a private German economics and business university is being sued by the school because he finished his degree too quickly. Marcel Paul finished 60 exams in 20 months, completing 11 semesters worth of work in only 3. The school says it is due an extra 3,000 euros for lost income because, I will quote, its fees are the total price for the studies, independent on how long the studies last. Close quotes. When I got the lawsuit, I thought it couldn't be true. Performance is supposed to be worth of something, commented Marcel Paul. Now we must ask, was Marcel Paul a genius? Or did he use massive open online courses, or MWOCs, and other free resources available for every seeker of study to study more effectively? We don't know it, but we can know the probability that it is increasing dramatically. And this is a question of not about teaching, but about learning. Action of a client, one should say. And this may be a sign of timidness of a traditional conservative culture. Now, a few words about inflation. The Economist in April 2012 reported about price inflation that remains relatively subdued in the rich world, even though the central banks are busily printing money, but other types of inflation are rampant, and they called it banflation, that needs to be recognized for the plague it has become. And let's go, for example, outside of the borders of academia. And despite the fact that we know few simple-minded grown-ups are working also in academia. Let's take the grossly underreported problem of size inflation, where clothes of any particular labeled size have steadily expanded over time. And the estimates of The Economist suggest that the average British size 14 of women's trousers is no more than 4 inches or 10 centimeters wider at the waist than it was in the 1970s. In other words, today's size 14 is really what it used to be labeled as size 18. And size 10 is really size 14. So you can play with a shallow satisfaction that, well, I am getting bigger, but I can wear the same clothes when I was in a teenage. But inflation has hit every corner of human endeavor, and also academy has not been spared. In academy, a bachelor's degree today is no longer sufficient to gain employment in the same jobs that may have only required 2 to 4 years studies in former years. And also, it has been demonstrated that today's A students would have received C's only 30 years ago. And when almost everything except education gets cheaper, must be on sale, and has lost some of its real value, patrons and customers will adjust accordingly. We can call it adjusted values or rise in cheating, but it means, in the essence, that our clients or students are accepting damaged goods because these are not relevant for their later realization in labor market. Many are buying only branded diploma, not the essence of current knowledge, because they know that they have to learn it anyway, but at the place and under the circumstances of the real work. Now, why does the cost of education carry on rising? One possible answer comes from coal industry. and particularly from the more effective use of coal. In 1865, the English economist William Stanley Jevons swam against the tide of popular opinion, and everybody was saying in these days that we must increase the efficiency of coal use, otherwise the industry will run out of coal. Jevons argued that, contrary to common intuition, technological improvements could not be relied upon to reduce fuel consumption. Quite the reverse, rise in efficiency lowered the threshold for consumption and increased overall rate of consumption of that resource. And we can see even in the healthcare, we are trying to innovate healthcare and introducing all kind of IT solutions, providing more services to everybody, lowering the threshold to do something beneficial for everybody's health. But overall cost for the society of healthcare are increasing, and this is a paradox called Jevons paradox. Therefore, my question is about the meaning of the higher level learning in the name of the conference. What is the real goal of heightened learning? If it serves the purpose of government, who must count money and will value efficiency, we will push the overall societal resource allocation for education higher, and that seems to be contrary to the objectives of governments. But if it's about superior learning, then centralized and politicized governance has never shown to be a good driver of innovation. And if it is a search for a lifeline for educators in academia, then it seems to be in conflict with both above assumptions. Therefore, it seems that we are entering a theater of liberal market of higher education, higher educational services, every so often provided by somebody outside of the university, because they still see themselves only through the mirror of publications and research, but by a small and a vibrant organizations consisting of true educators and new tools. It will be a personal, somewhat instinctive and wild decision both for students and for educators to choose the meeting platform in the future. And this is time to tell you a story told by CEO of Nokia, Stephen Elop, when he wrote the famous memo of burning platform. Elop used the metaphor of a man trapped on a burning platform, an oil platform, who had to make a decision to leap into the icy water in order to survive. Elop jumped with a Finnish company to the Hague of previous arch-enemy for more vibrant market situation. And they got really sick. You can only follow the stock price of Nokia and the size of mouth of every Finnish investor. Majority of Finns are investing into Nokia stock. And they got really sick, but are now recuperating. And we can't say whether Nokia made a right decision, but we can say that they jumped. So, not a very good examples to use for advice, but we must ask, are the teachers' interests best served in a centrally governed platform, or should they jump into icy water of liberal market that will hone the methods of education to the market needs? Maybe market needs not teaching, but constant and personally driven learning. Thank you for your attention.
So, thank you, Christian. And your questions, please. And there is one.
Karl, Tallinn University of Technology. Usually, higher educational systems are characterized by relations between three main actors, universities or higher educational institutions, state or Ministry of Education, and market. And I expected that the lecture will be about relations and changes in these relations. In Estonia, the relations are quite mixed. In some countries, higher education is free. In some countries, students must pay fees. In Estonia, half of students pay fees and half don't. And now there is a governmental intervention, and it is declared that Estonian students are not don't pay fees at all at Estonian universities. But this has actually been initiated by political reasons in order to increase the electoral results of a pro-patria party. And in our case, it would be necessary to discuss the educational results of this political intervention. Do you have some consideration of this? Do you approve these changes, free education, or do you have some critical thoughts about this? Thank you.
Of course, somebody has said that the person who has any sense of intelligence will be always critical, whatever somebody will say, that it is always possible to be critical, and of course I'm also in the essence against the move at the moment. I have several reasons for that, but from the other point of view, you can't be critical against the symptoms of the patient because these just happen, and these are a result of the change in society. Therefore, we must play the game because we can't decide for ourselves, but this was also one of the ideas of my presentation, is that we are actually on the burning platform, and we have to make the decision how we will continue to do our work, because you can see that you can't provide the education, not the science. I'm not talking about science and research, but you can't provide education for the population on the basis of old solutions. But the free, the essence how in Estonia the free studies were introduced is actually political, not trying to develop the society. So I am critical, but what can you do?
Brian Lassen from Arizona University of Life Sciences. Regarding your finish and your vision of a possible vision of the future, are there already grassroots in the icy water that are kind of spurring your vision currently of what other places to jump to already in existence, so to say?
Yeah, of course you can always see the first ones will drown, and then everybody will say, okay, this is a little dangerous and so on. But it's going on. You can see quite a lot of educators go into private market, and there are different countries who provide better or worse environment for this kind of business, and also the abrupt and an uncritical way of trying all kind of new things to do differently than it used to be. It's not guaranteed to success, but it's a symptom of we can't continue looking behind. We have to try something new, and this is a sign of everybody, not everybody, but quite a number of persons in educational sector jumping the platform.
Thank you. I'm a bit curious about this idea, because it does often seem that when we look at universities as providing a product. I think very often our students have a different conception of what the product is than what we have. We may think that the learning is the outcome and the gaining new skills, when for many students that's not the product at all. And the example of the students cheating, I think is a good example of that. That they look on the product as maybe getting the degree, the diploma, and if some learning happens along the way, that's fine, whatever. But can you address that idea of how we maybe haven't done a good job of explaining what our product is, or at least that disconnect between what we think our product is and what our students think it is?
I think that this connection comes from the change of students' mindset. That let's go back some 20 years. The student who came into university, he was more or less grown up. But nowadays they enter university and they have to, I'm of course not against fun and it must be there, but you can see that the students are prolonging entering the labor market and entering instead of university, especially if the university is free. So they try to postpone the critical phase in the life because everybody sees that it's not easy. And if I can gain some guarantees that the university will provide, this is the new kind of business. University provides a shelter, a little bit fun that is made by them mainly, and we can't give them guarantee that if you are exiting university, we can guarantee a place in the labor market. But the only thing they would like to have a well-branded type diploma. This is the only thing, actually. Of course, maybe I should take some voice back, but of course there are real learners in your university, but it depends on the amount and the year, how it happens. So this is where I think we are in the stage of trying to understand what has happened. Then we can make the correct moves.
And the last question.
Thank you. Is it on? Yeah. Thank you. It was very interesting. Marek Sammul from Tartu University. We keep talking about jumping from the oil platform and something being very wrong in our universities and something so on. But then Torni gave yesterday a lovely presentation showing how students actually tend to go more often or try to go more often to the departments or places which have the strongest historical culture built up, so strongest tradition. Are they just stupid?
I think it's a two-binary selection. They are interested, the students are interested, every young person is interested in somewhere, and then they tend to go where they can get more interesting things. And then I'm also not saying that everything is awful in university environment. I'm saying that you can feel there is a more burning smell that it used to have. Somebody can survive on a burning platform. Probably they will become better than others. But you can see that how much how many is running toward the burning platform at the moment. That this is the point we should consider and say that it is not a binary answer, but let's understand the situation and to make it better. So I'm keeping in my hand the white chalk on the blackboard. But the context isn't as funny as it used to be. So is my answer.
So now I would like to ask you a question. And I would say that mostly we have discussed at this conference and actually at most of the conferences where I have participated, the near-term future, where we are, what we're trying to do right now. And this discussion here has been more about strategic perspectives, in a couple of decades how higher education is going to change. And my question to you, and I would like to see the show of hands, and you all take a look at that, the result. The question is, who of you is aware of or has participated in a discussion at your university with the objective to figure out where will be the university in 20, 30 years, how we are going to teach in 20, 30 years, and how we are preparing to that future right now. So please show your hand who has participated in a discussion like that. A strong 10% of people. So maybe some piece of information, maybe we could go take this with us. Also take some moment to think about long-term future. But Christian, thank you once more.
Thank you. Aitäh.
Seal on tempel sinu jaoks. Okay. So, now the conference is almost over. And there have been interesting things going on in the lecture halls, in the corridors, in the hotel rooms. Maybe somebody has completed their paper late night or something else. So let's take a minute to reflect on our experiences and to think about the person who gave you most during this conference. And I start with saying thank you to the colleague of mine with whom I spent last night with on a phone, exchanging messages, reflecting on the brightest moments of this conference. So, you have all had your minute, and now I would like to invite the big boss of our Primus program, Urve Vool, to say the closing words of this program, this conference, before we move on to the second most important part of the conference, the official lunch. Yeah, microphone. No, here.
We have a last minute little talk about organizers. And this conference are organized by Foundation Archimedes and by program Primus. Foundation Archimedes is established by our government, and Archimedes is an independent body of dealing several programs in the field of training and education. This program, Primus, I am head of Higher Education Development Center, and this center deal 3 programs, Primus, Dora, and Educo. And these all programs are supported by European Union through European Social Fund as this conference. And this conference are supported by Higher Ministry of Education and Research. Our center organize every year one big conference, and I hope that you are participants very happy and enjoy your teaching job. By Archimedes, I have a great honor to thank all speakers and workshop leaders as a conference team. I would like to ask in the floor Larissa Jõgi, Tiia Rüütman, Iia Stone, Mari Karm, Anu Sarv, Kristiina Krabi, Eneken Titov, Rea Raus, Marge Täks, Katrin Karu, Katrin Raik, and Marvi Remmik. And special thanks to Mart Noormets as our moderator.
Now you understand the excitement of mine being engaged in such activities.
And special thanks for projects manager Ingrid Erlin. Thank you. Now we wish you a safe trip to home, and I'm confident that we will see you in the next training sessions and conferences. Thank you.
Helen.